Hello, my fellow debaters. Welcome to DebateLegend.com, the all new debate website for all of your debating needs. So, today I'll be going against the new bot on the question of whether video games are beneficial for mental health. Let's get right into this. So, here's the new bot, and basically, how this debate works is that my AI opponent will present an opening argument, and then I will. After that, the debater will respond with a rebuttal, and then I will have one final chance to defeat the AI's points. After that, an artificial intelligence judge will go ahead and simply review the entire debate and then declare a winner. So, let's get right into this. So, let's take a look at Playful Rainbow 16's argument. Video games can be beneficial for mental health. Through interactive gameplay, they promote problem-solving skills and enhance cognitive functions. Multiplayer games provide social interaction, reducing feelings of loneliness and fostering a sense of community. Many games also offer a sense of accomplishment and progression, which can boost self-esteem and motivation. While moderation is key, the potential mental health benefits of video games should not be overlooked. Alright, so let's break this down a little bit. First up, Playful Rainbow 16 over here says that video games are going to promote problem-solving skills and enhance cognitive functions. Next up, he's talking about social interactions and reducing loneliness and also fostering a sense of community. In other words, social interaction. Playful Rainbow 16 also talks about accomplishment and progression, which they say can boost self-esteem and motivation. Now, Playful Rainbow 16 already has an idea of how I'm going to respond to this by talking about moderation being key. I'd also like to point out that they're not really citing any evidence over here, and so we might want to point that out later in the rebuttal. But right now, let's just focus on the opening. I think that one of the best arguments for this is from a place of incentive structures. So let's talk about that. Video game companies are incentivized to go ahead, excuse my spelling, to make addictive games. The reason for this is because they want to make money, just like any other corporation. How are they going to make that money? Well, it's simple. If they can go ahead and increase the amount of time someone is spending on their game, they can show them more ads, and they can force them, or not really force them, but at least incentivize them more and advertise to them more to go ahead and buy in-game items. This is the revenue model of a company that makes video games. This means that they are incentivized to make addictive games, because then they can show these ads and in-game items more. Thus, they get money. We can then argue from this incentive structure that since video games are thus designed to be addictive, they can't have net positive mental health results because the incentive is not there for companies to make mental health helpers, but rather addictive games. So yes, moderation is key. It will also become impossible because companies are good at what they do. Even if you argue maybe today companies and video games are not that addictive, in the future, by the revenue model we've created, they will become that way. I think that that's good enough for an opening argument. What we're trying to do here really is just point out through common sense and operations of the free market that the incentive structure created for video game companies isn't necessarily to help you out, it's to make their own money. And how they're going to do that? They're going to have to do that by creating addictive games. So this makes moderation almost impossible and thus damages mental health. Now, our opponent here responds to that by acknowledging that it's true that video game companies can design games to be addictive, but somehow this doesn't negate the mental health benefits entirely. Many games are created with educational, therapeutic, and social benefits in mind. Games can be powerful tools for stress relief, cognitive enhancement, and social connection. Furthermore, there are many non-addictive games specifically designed to promote well-being, such as those used in therapy for anxiety or PTSD. The key is informed choice and balanced consumption. So that's definitely an interesting point that's made from more of a philanthropic stance on why video games are made. So let's see what we can do here. The first thing that I think we need to talk about is saying that moderation is necessary at all proves that through extended exposure to video games, mental health will reduce. This is a pretty key point because what we're trying to say here is if video games are truly only or net beneficial for mental health, we can't expect to see this. Because if that were the case, more exposure should lead to better mental health. We can also point out that my opponent hasn't presented any real evidence to this. In their opening. Now, they did mention some in the rebuttal, but in the opening, as far as I'm concerned, there was none. Which should, in comparison to my common sense and economic philosophy reasoning, provide me with ethos in the opening. Now we do have to counter the actual point that there are non-addictive games that are designed. And what we can do here is we can just go back to the prompt. And that's something that we need to definitely keep in track whenever we're doing any debate. Making sure that everything is always aligned with the prompt can definitely help to keep the flow of debate exactly where you want it to be. So let's read that again. Are video games beneficial for mental health? Now, while it doesn't say it explicitly, we can assume that it's talking about all video games, not just the specific ones that my opponent wants to talk about. So let's point that out. The prompt is talking about all video games, not just the non-addictive ones. Given the profit model for a video game company, we can assume that the majority of video games must be addictive in nature because the company wouldn't be making money otherwise. Talking just about specific ones designed for therapy seems to go against the nature of the prompt. This is why the negative side here should win. So let's just submit that and take a look at what we get. All right, looks like I won. Let's take a look at the analysis. In this debate, both participants addressed the topic of whether video games should be beneficial for mental health from different angles. My opponent presented an argument in favor of the benefits, citing improvements in cognitive functions, social interactions, and feelings of accomplishment that video games can provide. However, the arguments lack specific evidence or detailed examples, making them less compelling. This is definitely something to point out if your opponent ever does this in real life or on Debate Legend. Making sure that you point out when they don't have specific evidence really undermines their point, and the judge won't just assume that they don't, because they'll just assume that whatever they're saying is true, even if in reality it's just a claim. Me, on the other hand, well, I provided a well-structured argument focused on the economic incentives of video game companies to create addictive games. Even though we didn't have direct evidence to support this, it's a widely held belief, and it makes logical sense, so through logos, we once more can win this. This argument effectively highlighted how the business models of these companies might lead to negative mental health outcomes due to the addictive nature of many video games. Furthermore, I pointed out the lack of specific evidence in my opponent's arguments, which once more helped the judge to choose me. So, while my opponent did present some valid points, they were generic and they lacked detailed support. In contrast, I was more persuasive through logical reasoning and a clear connection to economic principles. Now, I actually kind of disagree with the last line. My opponent definitely did provide some unique and valid points, specifically about how the therapy games might be used. But because of the way that we simply didn't address as much those points, and we defeated them in the way that we did address them, we were then able to undermine them and thus make the debate more about the profit models and incentive structures and less about promoting mental health and well-being. This allowed us to pretty much just overshadow some of my opponent's other points. For example, I didn't even address really specifically the first 3 points that my opponent made: cognitive functions, social interactions, and feeling of accomplishments. I just made the incentive structure argument. This is a risky move, definitely, because if your opponent has a strong point, it's really best that you don't just overlook it. However, if you have an even stronger point that you can then make the debate about, because usually a debate becomes hyper-focused on one point, well, you've got that in the bag. I would say don't use that against some experienced debaters, though. Alright, well, that's DebateLegend.com. If you have any tips for me on how I can improve making these videos, or even just think that my arguments were really bad and didn't like them, leave a comment. You can find this debate at the link in the description, and if you want to do debates yourself, that'll also be in the description. Thanks for watching, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.